Hi, Esther. Thank you for having me. It's great to be with everyone, and thank you for those in attendance for being here about a very, very important subject, just the things that we deal with in just family life. Uh, we deal with life and we deal with death. And sadly, in my story is, first off, God is sovereign. Um, he allowed the death of my father. At the hands of the hospital. It has been a very difficult road in processing and what we went through. Um, and many, many families have gone through very similar things in the last several years. And this is basically my family's COVID story with my 88-year-old father. Very active, very spry. He worked out at the gym 5 days a week for an hour. He did, wood cutting, fire, just he was very active for an 88-year-old man. And early 2022, he was diagnosed. We all ended up with COVID. Um, and he was the one more impacted by it. And we had pretty much decided we were going to try to just treat from home, and we used ivermectin, and it wasn't being necessarily readily dispensed by the medical community. Um, but there was a dispute within my family, a sibling, that it was the horse paste that we were using, the ivermectin from the um, uh, feed store, which I used it. I know so many people who used it, but there was that resistance. So it turned out that I needed to take my dad to urgent care. I wanted to take him to a standalone urgent care, but he insisted, thinking that the urgent care that he chose was actually the urgent care of his primary care physician. So he fully expected that would be the protocol. He would actually work with his own doctor, and he trusted him. He had had him for 7 years. Um, Unfortunately, that is not what happened. Once he was diagnosed, he was airlifted to another larger hospital in the area, and because that's where all the COVID patients were going, into the ICU of a larger hospital in the area. I lived in Central Oregon. Um, so once he was there, um, his own doctor was told to stand down and could not have anything to do with my dad's case. That was devastating because my dad chose that urgent care that was part of the hospital in our community. And he fully thought that that would be the case, but they assigned him a hospitalist. That is what came out of the Affordable Care Act. Hospitalist is a very common name where they just assign somebody to, and it was a fairly young doctor. Um, we had, he made it about my dad's age. He's 88, and just, I fought that for 3 days of him being at the hospital. Finally, I actually had to file a formal complaint with the hospital and the VA. My dad was an Air Force vet, um, to tell him to stop making this about my dad's age and treat him, treat him for COVID. I wanted ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, the monoclonal antibodies, and I specifically put in the record we did not want remdesivir. So it really was this battle between the um, doctor and myself. Um, he originally said we could come see him, but then a hospital administrator came along and said, no, you cannot do that. His nurse said he was a miracle patient. He was getting well so quickly. But 10 days into his recovery, I kept wanting to try to get him home. 10 days in, they, basically were said the only way you can come see him is through comfort care orders, is to if we signed comfort care orders, and then we could see him. But what that meant was end of life. He had done well for the first 10 days, but because they would not treat him specifically for COVID, um, so we never saw my dad those last 2 weeks, and it was his final day of life that, they let us come, but we had to sign the papers to even get to see him, and I asked them, "Do not give him anything, um, until after we've had time with him." And they really didn't. I'm guessing they didn't want us to have a conversation with him, because they had made many, many promises of being able to have an iPad in the room and talk to my dad, and, um, those things never happened, and hindsight is always 20/20. There's things I would have done differently, but if I had tried to go in and take him, they would have arrested me for taking him out. And so if you've gone through this, I hope and pray that you've been able to go through a healing process. Miss my dad terribly. I would have never wished our experience on anyone. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Esther, thank you for doing this podcast. And I just pray blessings on you all. Thank you so much. Bye bye.